The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining in. We'll just give it a couple of more minutes for a few more attendees to join in and then we'll begin. Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you once again for joining in. My name is Paresh and I'm going to be your moderator for this webinar. Before I go ahead and introduce our speaker for the day, Greg, just if you have any questions during or at the end of the webinar, please feel free to use the chat functionality to type them in, and Greg will be glad to answer those. Uh, so before I hand it over to Greg, would like to quickly introduce him. Today we are speaking about a very interesting topic, why marketing is broken and how time to value fixes it. Greg is a Senior Vice President of Customer Experience at edynamic. He has spent 21 years living and breathing digital. Before edynamic, Greg spent 8 years at Sitecore leading business optimization strategies in global and regional capacity. Greg specializes in writing strategy to drive business uplift using Sitecore's marketing capabilities. Uh, uh, so over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much, Paresh, and thank you everybody for attending the webinar. I really appreciate it. As Paresh said, my name is Greg Baxter. I work with edynamic and I work very specifically around the Sitecore Experience Cloud. So I spent the last 6 years working with customers to surface platform return on investment and to really help shift revenue north by utilizing the marketing capability of the software. So today I want to talk about just a couple of things. I really want to talk about why as marketers we really need to get a handle on this concept of data-driven marketing, and why websites can no longer be like just publishing engines, and it's a little bit like going to the drive-in. You just sit there and passively watch it. Digital business in the modern era requires a two-way dialogue between brand and consumer, and technologies like Sitecore have the ability, of course, to sense and adapt to customer intent in real time and surface the right calls to action content and compelling experiences to drive customers from interested through to customer status through to advocate. I'm just going to spend a couple of seconds talking about us, and I'm really going to keep this short. We're edynamic. We're a global digital marketing and technology agency, and our core function really is around this concept of customer or client engagement. It's really incredibly important in the digital era that you understand who your customers are and you have the capability to speak to them in real time with great relevance, and typically increasingly across channels that they choose to engage with you. So really, customer engagement is built into our core DNA. We know from actual case studies that we work on ourselves, and of course I was a part of many of these with Sitecore over 8 years, that CX leaders typically, on average, outgrow the laggards by double digits. And I've been around projects where I've seen conversions, core business conversions, grow from anything from 60 to 400%. So I worked on a project before I left Asia Pacific with a bank, and their sales measurably grew 60% over digital channels in the quarter after implementing this kind of technology. And that's a rock star outcome for a marketer. We know that Gartner and all of the analysts say that, you know, customer experience is going to be critical, and 89% of businesses now really expect to compete in that on that battlefield, because really there are so many competing offerings. Everything is a mouse click away, so it's really important to have customers and keep them close. And Forrester's famous now quote, "To be truly competitive, you have to become customer obsessed and have a deep knowledge of and engagement with your customers." And this really makes me think of brand to consumer plays and business to business plays. But a classic brand to consumer play would of course be the Dollar Shave Club, who were bought for a phenomenal amount of money, principally because they managed to forge a really deep engagement over social networks and across their website with their customer base. So it's super critical. Also, it's long been considered that customer experience is the domain strictly of business to consumer. Edynamic, I'd say about 70% of our work is actually business to business at this point in time, and it is now just as important in the B2B arena as it is in the business to consumer arena. So there's some lovely stats up there on the page saying that, you know, Salesforce say that 70% of business buyers say it's critical for companies to provide a personalized experience. Forrester's quote, Gartner's quote, and you know, the reasons for this are really quite simple. It's not like when a business-to-business buyer walks into their workplace that they switch off everything they know and understand about the internet from using it as a civilian, for want of a better term. So they know the category killers like Amazon, eBay, and all of the rest of them are utilizing personalization routines to surface content that is important and relevant to customers out of incredibly deep content repositories. So it's becoming more and more important, and on a B2B front, to also take this on. And just the last of the quotes before we get into, you know, what are the real breaks on this, and why is this so hard to do in the 21st century? And when you think about it, computers and technology gather unthinkable amounts of information about, you know, customers and people on websites. So why is it so hard for us to be able to understand and leverage that data? And really, it's a number of things which we'll go into detail. The quote I love most on this particular page is the one from Steve Jobs, where he says, "Get closer than ever to your customers, so close that you tell them what they need well before they realize it themselves." And I've long believed, and I've proved this many, many times over the last 8 years, that when you deliver this level of personalized service and you do it really well, it's not perceived as hard sell. It's perceived as a service to the customer. You're literally making their life more easy and their experience less broken and fragmented. And so there's a plethora of quotes. You can look up all of these all over the internet yourself. And I imagine you're on this call because you're using Sitecore. You know that the platform was bought because of its capability to undertake these things. Many of you have probably done, you know, the lift and shift phase 1 thing, so the website's up and running on Sitecore, and the huge question is, what next, and how do we get there? And we're going to talk about that today. One of the things that really blows my hair back, given where we live in terms of digital right now, are some of these stats I got from Forrester and the Fornays group. 9 out of 10 global marketers are not trained to calculate a return on investment. 8 out of 10 struggle with being able to properly demonstrate the effectiveness of their spending campaigns and activities. And we're going to look at a couple of case studies as we go forward. And when you reflect that these are measurable, true, uplift business results, it's not hard to see that marketers that are able to evidence that are really going to be the survivors in a kind of singularity. and that singularity will really, in my view, see marketers that are talking about brand amplification or more page visits or, you know, increased social contact are really going to be the ones that are going to struggle. The marketers who walk in and say, the work we did to drive the call to action to increase sales and measurable MQLs and can prove it, are going to be the rock stars. So it's really important that we believe marketing has to have an ROI. It is the chief driver now of the CIO suite, so much so that companies like Coca-Cola no longer actually have a CMO. They have a chief growth officer, and that's a really important distinction to make. So let's talk about some of the barriers here. And, you know, it's really simple. And we all interact with websites and businesses digitally where we experience this, really from some of the largest brands on down. We have still today a really fractured customer experience. So when you have businesses like SuperOffice saying that 67% of customers churn due to bad customer experience, that's an enormously large number. Salesforce say that 75% of customers expect consistency in CX across channels. So you really need to leverage the information that is captured, not just in the CMS and Sitecore, but in your other platforms, and you need to be able to stitch these into a single view of the customer. People who are looking at upgrading to Sitecore 9 have a real treat in front of them, because XConnect lets you pull all of that information in and out of the Sitecore Experience database and feed it into CRMs and MarTech, other adjacent MarTech technologies. Really, really exciting times. Gartner even says that by 2020, customers will manage 85% of their relationship with an enterprise and never even speak to a human. And I think as we see the rise of bots and AI, this is almost inevitable. Market forces and financial constraints will make this an absolute reality quicker than we think. The second biggest issue that we see all of the time, and I've personally, you know, had to fight this for a long time over such a long career with digital, is that our data tends to live in silos. And right now, the number one task, if you like, of the CMO is really to unify customer data across their MarTech stack. So the number one issue facing these people right now is they do not have a single view of the customer. The number two issue is that the data is so scattered across the enterprise that they cannot generate meaningful insights to execute digital strategy on. And the largest to the smallest companies still struggle with this today. It's incredibly important to build a fluid ecosystem where intel can be picked up across pretty much every channel and fed into the place where people really convert on many, many sales. And that's a website, whether it's being rendered from mobile or tablet, or it's on a desktop itself. So it's really important to get there. And the outcome of all of these things is really poor quality sales leads. I'd love to have $10 for the amount of time I've seen a sales department saying marketing doesn't give us meaningful leads, and marketing are doing everything they can in their power to try and generate that. So there's a real disconnect here. And what that kind of means is that 79% of leads, according to Marketing Sherpa, don't convert, which is a staggering number, nearly 80%. 60% of salespeople say generating high quality MQLs is a problem for their organization, and 30% of salespeople really struggle with prospecting. It's a tough gig. So what they really want is high quality leads. And of course, if you're instrumenting Sitecore to measure somebody's profile, their engagement level, their lead score, and you're triggering an MQL off a real marketing event or trigger on a website, and only that is flowing into a CRM, then you pretty much have a system whereby marketing are delivering exactly the right, highly qualified information to sales. And whether it's a long burn B2B deal or a shorter burn B2B deal, the conversation is much, much quicker. Even if it's business to consumer, this is incredibly important because, of course, there's a strong aftercare and customer retention in all levels of business. So after all of my years at Sitecore, and I worked very, very hard with the global team on things like the customer maturity model, and was actually part of the 5-person global SBOSS group. who helped define the steps of that customer maturity model and helped build out the steps and workshops, the actual workshops that people go through to go from zero to hero, as quickly as possible. And time to value, the thing we're talking about today, is designed to be a really fast burn to turning on Sitecore's engagement capability. There is a bigger play, of course, and that is what edynamic has sort of dubbed the revenue engine, where once we have Sitecore fully optimized to catch and convert by presenting a personal, relevant experience to the visitors to the website, we plug it into a marketing automation platform like Sitecore or Marketo, and we plug it into Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, or in the law industry into Interaction, or whatever those CRM systems might be. So the idea is time to value is kind of like base camp 1 on the big drive to the revenue engine. So the intent here is not to boil the ocean. That just flat out doesn't work. It turns into an 18-month project. It's full of fatigue. So it's our belief that this can be done really, really quickly if we look at not so much the big data, but the little critical data. So it's our intent to take traditional publishing house Sitecore CMS owners who are still using Sitecore largely as a publishing platform. They're doing updates to content. They're kind of still using traffic analytics, so they've strapped in Google Analytics or whatever, but they're not really measuring engagement. They're still measuring 20,000 people came to the website, 5,000 went to this page. We don't know what they did, but then they went to this page and then they left. They're still dealing with spray and pray kind of email marketing, where they kind of may be using Sitecore or Marketo or something, or even EXM, but they're still kind of just loading up the spam cannon and belting out the same email to every single user once a month. They might also be pushing information to, Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever social network, and they're campaigning off landing pages. Excuse me for 1 second. Forgive me, I'm battling a little bit of allergy. So the idea here is to take that traditional and move it to a time to value thing where the ROI of Sitecore and the ROI of marketing activity can be measured. So we really focus on the basics. Getting engagement analytics down first is absolutely critical. You can't personalize towards what you don't understand and what you can't measure. And we know, and I know from working a lot in the industry, that people even struggle to define personalization. What is it going to be? How big is it? How do we make a project out of it? What does it all mean? It's really nebulous. If you define your engagement analytics up front, then the drivers for personalization fall into place very, very quickly. So we also roll out real-time profiling. It's incredibly important to know who is on your website, what segments we can push them into, and what calls to action and what content we can have that will be compelling for them to move down the customer funnel. And of course, A/B testing. With Sitecore, from version 8 onwards, A/B testing is a really simple thing to do. It's a powerful system. We'll look at some outcomes of this. And really what we would encourage is really a culture of testing. And I can almost hear people on the call saying, yeah, but we don't have the team. One of the best projects I ever did around Sitecore personalization and all of this stuff was for that bank I mentioned before with the 60% uplift in sales. And the reality is one guy drove it. He was just laser focused on what it was he was driving. So time to value, which we're going to talk about today, is a real way to take Sitecore from 0 to 60. And I'm going to stress this. It is our intent to run the workshops, generate the recommendations and insights, and instrument this out inside 30 days. So this is not a really long, hard to get funding for project. This is meant to be a very fast process. And I'm going to be a little bit kind of blunt about this and literally say that in all of the years that I've been working with Sitecore, which is 9+ now, if you don't enable things like engagement analytics and this technology, you're literally throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's why your organizations bought the technology. And sooner or later, somebody in the organization will ask, why are we paying sometimes quite large maintenance fees when we're really just using this as a glorified publishing tool? And it's a really good question. And the answer is it can be hard to get there. Time to value was modeled off of course, Sitecore's customer maturity model, but I always had the sense that it could be really amped up and really sped up and pushed into a sprint rather than a rather than a really long process. So I think of time to value as base camp one on the path to having that full single view of the customer, which, by the way, the new data protection regulations kind of mandates. Imagine trying to fulfill the right to be forgotten or any of its sort of more interesting angles if you could not identify that data across your organization. So anyway, let's move through this. We're going to go through what time to value is and what it generates. So step one here really has to be about getting the foundation pieces right. And I cannot stress this enough. When I'm running consultancies, which I run maybe every 1 to 2 weeks with our customer base, you cannot do this without actually building out Sitecore's engagement analytics. And the reason for this is simple. It's because they're actionable and we can put a value on them. It's a pretty simple concept. If I go onto a website and I maybe read a testimonial or watch a video, I'm slightly engaged. If I sign up for a newsletter, I'm more engaged. If I sit through a webinar, I'm more engaged. If I contact sales or I do something that will trigger a financial outcome, I'm way engaged. So we tend to measure these things so we can step people and personalize people through this process. And I do say that it is the most important thing you will do with Sitecore, and I'm continually bewildered by the many times I've walked into an organization, flipped the lid, logged in, and thought, oh, there's actually no meaningful data being captured here. And the truth of it is, until you build these engagement value goals out and then until you establish profiles, the most important data is simply not there. And every day, oceans of customer intel is just going down the river. So there's a real methodology around doing this. I've done this many times, both with Sitecore and edynamic. And the best way to do this is to start with a business alignment. So we try to identify the strategic theme of a company. Something like Lexus is affordable luxury, Walmart maybe, lowest possible cost. A business I'm working with right now is the #1 supplier of student studies abroad, or whatever that might be. So we identify why does this business exist and what keeps the lights on from a really high level business perspective. Then we look at the business objectives, and they're usually pretty simple. That you want to retain and acquire new customers, retain existing customers. You might want to provide a better digital experience through personalization. You may want to increase thought leadership around your brand by publishing content out onto networks, but really importantly, measuring the impact of that, particularly around consultancy businesses and law firms and stuff. Then we align the marketing objectives that meet the business objective, that meet the strategic objective, and only then do we gather in a room and collectively work out what the digital goals that we should measure are. I guarantee you, if I go into a business and do this the old-fashioned way and say, oh, I'm going to have 12 meetings with every stakeholder here, I will walk out with 12 different answers as to why this website exists. That makes it almost impossible for a digital agency to create a really focused and tight strategy that is going to have an impact on the revenue outcomes of a business. So I really love to run this workshop, this engagement value workshop, with all of those stakeholders in one room. Why? Because it drives enterprise or business-wide agreement about what needs to be measured. And when we discover what needs to be measured, clearly that is the kind of stuff that we want to optimize towards. The other thing it does really beautifully is it puts out the battle of the homepage. I'm sure you guys have experienced this, guys and ladies. So everybody in the organization thinks their division is the most important, therefore it should have, a priority spot on the homepage. And the joy of doing this allows us the ability for everyone to have the homepage under the right circumstances, depending on their segment, depending on somebody's place in the funnel. So we really try to bring these down to the critical few. This is an artifact called the Sitecore engagement value scale, and it is what we try to build when we take the engagement analytics piece on. And you can see that there are really high value goals at the top of the pyramid. So this is a typical B2B play. So requesting a call or requesting pricing are really high value things. People engaging in thought leadership and doing the kinds of things that build out trust and help people through the decision process are mid-pyramid. Request for white paper, sign up for webinar, and down the bottom is the real top of funnel stuff. Register for newsletter, watch a short video, or whatever that might be. So the first thing we do is really build out these engagement value goals. And I'd like to talk to you really quickly, a couple of minutes, about a business that did this incredibly well. So this is Danone Nutrition. They make baby milk powder, right? But what they wanted to do was forge a really top-of-mind relationship with their consumers, because if you buy one can of baby milk powder, these guys go broke. If you buy 20 or 30, they're in business. So they really needed to do things like increase rebuy. So rather than just build a straightforward e-com site where you could buy a tin of this stuff when you were too busy to go to the shop or whatever it might be, they built a portal where mothers could go in and ask questions about the anxious moments that arise during pregnancy. So they built a portal that literally personalizes on every week of a pregnant person or a pregnant lady's journey, because pregnancy is two things. It's like wonderful, wonderful news, but internally there's a whole lot of am I doing the right thing for this child? What if this child has got a milk allergy? What are the recipes that I can create that are going to give this young life the best possible chance it can have? So they built an online resource, and they built it based on this concept of what's really important for them as a business. So their strategic objective was really simple: ensure that nutrition is brand of choice. It's lovely. It's like a balanced scorecard, and whole corporations run their business on 7 or 8 key items in a balanced scorecard, and digital can be quite similar. So underneath that, there are marketing objectives. They wanted people to sign up to this website because they hooked into Europe's biggest social network, because they had care line people ready to talk to a lady at any point in time, and they wanted this long-term multi-touch relationship with their customers. So they wanted to generate demand. So there were, lots and lots and lots of resources at 24 weeks pregnant, 25 weeks pregnant, 22, 18, 15, that delivered real information about what was happening through this entire process. And of course, and it might seem strange, but third on the tier there is generate sales, visit the web shop, and so forth. So from that construct, they built their engagement value pyramid. And you can see that right at the top, we have membership confirmed. So that's their biggest goal on the website. Not surprisingly, completing my situation was the next highest. And through a variety of digital mechanisms like quizzes and gated content and trade shows and all kinds of stuff, they endeavored to find out what the birth date or the due date of the child was. And once they had that key piece of information, they could, of course, customize the website on a weekly basis, just with pre-canned content, right? On a weekly basis, to always present a visitor with information that was exactly bang on for their term of pregnancy. So you would contact Careline chat or email them from a mobile app for 25 points and talk to a healthcare professional. You could complete an online purchase, but the big thing here is to complete the contact data component of this. And down further, we have things like online tools, so running a tool around child allergy or a recipe generator or whatever. And then at the bottom, worth 0, visit online shop, view membership sign up form, and other abandonment events. So they built a personalization strategy and a testing strategy, for that matter, completely in alignment with this pyramid. And the business results speak for themselves. The marketing team that built this were able to prove and evidence and measure revenue growth from their store of 75% month on month. They were able to really hammer the critical rebuy component here by 140%. So those are incredibly great outcomes. And I'm sure any digital marketer would want to do this, because it represents, at the end of the day, 700% year-on-year growth. you know, a simply staggering number. So the first thing we do is build that engagement value scale and get that completely right. The second thing we do is exploit the low-hanging fruit in Sitecore's personalization engine. So rules-based personalization is the simplest thing that you can do with Sitecore. It is literally, if you have that engagement value score and you know where you're going with it, as simple as falling off a log. In all honesty, this was designed for marketers to do, and it is very simple. It's based on this concept of the digital fingerprint. And what that means is every time you visit a website, your browser stores your geolocation, the campaign identifier that you may or may not have come in on, the visit number, the region, language, any goals that you might have fulfilled in a previous visit, the date and the time, the business name coming in, and so forth. So it is very easy to build out a personalized hero image, for example, based on campaign. And by that I mean maybe somebody like Nissan, and we'll see an example of that very soon, put out onto Facebook, or actually rather Google AdWords, a Google AdWord for the Nissan Pathfinder. So when you click on that, Sitecore knows, because it can read the inbound link and the campaign code, that that's the vehicle you're interested in. So the website turns into Pathfinder. The big hero image is about Pathfinder, the testimonial is about Pathfinder, the video is about Pathfinder, and after a little bit of repeat visit, when somebody's clicked on enough content to show that they're highly interested, they surface the big two calls to action for Nissan, which are book a test drive and contact a dealer. So this is really simple stuff. And in my experience, there are 4 or 5 of these things that work every time. Campaign works every time. It's literally a no-brainer. Visit number works every time. First 3 visits, establish trust. If I look at the big corporate overview video, assign a goal to that, and if I've seen it once, swap that placeholders content out with the next thing you want to show them, rather than keep showing them the same thing that they've seen over and over and over again. So this is really simple stuff to do. So here's an example, and I gave it before, of Nissan. So essentially you've got on screen here 2 different people searching for a Nissan at exactly the time on Google. One is searching for a Nissan Juke, one is searching for the Nissan Patrol, and when they hit the site, the inbound link is red, and they see the car that that aligns with their search intent. I know this sounds like really simple stuff, and it sounds like a no-brainer, but this works, and it works literally every time. So the outcomes of Nissan doing this were huge. This is a company that spends many tens of millions of dollars a year marketing. So they have an uplift of 150% in test drives, measurable. So Nissan come back after this and basically said their internal metric was that 1 out of every 2 test drives turns into a Nissan deal or a Nissan deal. So the web team and the strategy team that put this one together increased sales of vehicles across the website by a measurable 75%. Extraordinary. They also hit the same uplift level in contact us, and those were the 2 things at the top of their engagement value scale. So you can have more than one thing occupy all of those tiers. Goal abandonment was halved, so form abandonment and you know, build your car abandonment. And really importantly, they cut 30% off the bounce rate for their very expensive advertising. So that is you know, a really large win again. The third thing that we do always is set up some profiles, because it's enormously important to understand who is on your website in real time, unless you're going to sit there and just create generic content till the end of time that speaks to everybody. And what you're doing if you do that is you're training people not to come back, because they've consumed the content. It's never going to change based on what they're doing right now or their interest level. So we think profiling is really important. It's also not as difficult as people think. So often profiling is actually sitting right on your top navigation. For example, if I visited, you know, that car site, that Nissan that I was talking about before, they've already done a pile of work on what the information architecture should look like. So you would see something like family cars, sedans, 4-wheel drives, utes. And if you're going to personalize or profile somebody on that site, it would literally be car preference. Small car, family car, sports car, 4-wheel drive, SUV, truck. End of story. Then you would probably profile somebody on budget, under $30,000, under $20,000, over $50,000. And when you build those out, you recognize very quickly that somebody is interested in a SUV. It is a family-based user because maybe they're looking at health and safety information, and the amount of accessories they're adding to that car suggests that they have a budget of $40,000. Then it's really simple to personalize out the hero image and right down to the color preference they're looking at and say, this car is in stock, it is sitting here ready for a test drive, complete the test drive booking form. And you know, when you stitch together the information that you have around a viable customer experience, naturally people are corralled and migrated down the sales funnel. It just works. Here's another example of personalization. Second biggest bank in Russia, PSV Bank, and they did their profiling, and they only made 4 profiles here, guys. So there's no need to make this unbelievably complex. So they personalized customers on whether they were, you know, mum and dad bankers, personal bankers, whether they were private banking big clients, so high net worth individuals, business, small to medium business, and corporations. And they did some really basic low-hanging fruit personalization around geolocation. So if there was a bank event in somebody's geolocation or within X kilometers of them, they would see that on the homepage. So they knew that they could get there really easily. So their goal was to increase organic loan conversions over the website. So fill out our form to start the dialogue about a loan. And they were able to increase that by a whopping 500% because they laser focused their personalization strategy around delivering the right form and the right content during the decision process and made it super easy for customers to engage with them. It just makes all kinds of sense. They also enjoyed a 150% increase in traffic, and I believe something like 100% increase in mobile traffic. The fourth thing that we do all of the time in time to value is just run some A/B tests. But you know, let's not murder ourselves with workload here, and let's not make a rod for our backs. Let's A/B test the most important calls to action on the website, or maybe the most important form. And really, again, this is pretty simple to execute inside Sitecore. I will say it is vastly easier in versions 8 and up. There was a massive redesign of the UI at that point. Before then, it was a little tougher to do. But with 8 and particularly 9, it's now just baked into the DNA of the software. And really simple to do. Maybe don't even worry with hardcore multivariant tests and all of that kind of stuff. Just do some simple A/B testing on things like major buttons for calls to action, and maybe the marketing line or the strap line in a hero image, and start there. And here's an example of Dollywood doing some really simple A/B testing that had a very profound effect. So they have on their homepage a thing about their season pass, and they really want to sell a bunch of season passes, and it's obvious why. It's a high dollar item. The more of those they can sell, the more people are going to be driven in terms of footfall into the park more regularly. They'll spend more money on, you know, soda and hamburgers and all of that kind of stuff, and they may even take out the accommodation in there. So they want to drive this, and they tested the orange box that you can see underneath the maroon box. So purchase today before the offer ends, prices go up soon, offer ends Jan 31, prices go up after January 3 rather. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to sit down and figure out these 4 variants, and this test, hand on heart, would take you maybe 15 minutes to instrument. And you can measure the test on the trailing conversion goal of booking the season pass, as well as the click-through if you want. So some pretty powerful tools right there. No code injection, no 3-month project, no, you know, exploding brain rocket scientist stuff. Just come up with a couple of strap lines like that and see what happens, because you can deploy it and undeploy it incredibly quickly. So this one tanked really bad. 18% below the 3rd best one. So, you know, this concept of prices go up soon just turned people off. And you can kind of extrapolate out why in the hypothesis, right? Prices go up, that's an ugly message to kind of give. This one came third, this one came second, and the winner outperformed the rest with a whopping, sorry, let me re-click that, with a whopping 21%, nearly 22% increase. So this is being measured against people actually buying the pass. So again, a really low-cost test to run with a very significant economic output. Again, the key to doing this stuff is to have a really achievable hypothesis and to not attempt to boil the ocean. Do this in a really quick wins, short business burst kind of methodology. The big upside of all of this, of course, is all of this information is pouring into the Sitecore Experience database. And this is actually nutritious we're looking at right now. So we can see across in the timeline every touch point this particular customer, Susan de Groot, had with her digital channels. And those blue bubbles and those things on the timeline are significant conversion points. So right over to the left is where she probably became a known customer. You can click on that and see the content, campaign, and digital experience that led her to go from an anonymous user to obviously a logged in, known, acquired contact. And you know, we can then look at her best pattern matches. 6-month-old baby, milk allergy, looking for a nutrition feeding schedule. So we could say very easily, pull me out every other Suzanne that's in the database that meets that pattern, and then show her the same cluster of content that, that drove Suzanne to actually log in and create an account. So we can see her activity overview, we can see her engagement value to us, we can see, of course, things like the number of visits, we can see the pattern matches, we can see how many times she contacted Careline, we can see every campaign she's been a part of, and if she logged in with Facebook, we would be able to pull down her publicly available Facebook profile data and also populate XDB with it. The thing about XDB that you've got to realize is that every one of these pieces of analytics roll-up is actionable. And the second thing is, we're not measuring groups here. Human beings are not birds that flock. We're not fish that swim in a school. We're actually individuals. So we can look at the individual contact record of every single person that looks at our website. And of course, then we can look for segments that we can broadly market to. It just makes an enormous amount of sense. So really, to conclude, time to value is, you know, a giant leap for marketing kind. And I can't say this enough. If you're having difficulty getting buy-in from an executive level around these kind of projects, time to value is not a threatening exercise in terms of time frame or in terms of cost. It's designed to be really, really fast. And we'll go through a really well-worn path to utilizing Sitecore. Start with engagement, turn on the simple personalization, run up some profiles, and run up some tests. And at that point, you will have the genesis of single view of customer. What we would do sort of going forward is, honestly, you probably let this run for maybe a quarter, gather the data, gather the insights based on real data and not a focus group and not gut feel, and then optimize that marketing rev for the second quarter. But you would probably at that point really start to think about, how can we use Sitecore's marketing automation? We don't want to buy Eloqua, we don't want to buy Marketo. Sitecore 9's internal marketing automation is incredible. I was at a workshop last week where our director of marketing automation, Otto Warner, in the workshop, instead of using a whiteboard, literally built the nurture flows inside Sitecore in real time. Just amazing stuff. So, you know, if you have Marketo, if you have Eloqua, we have all of the connectors to connect that stuff. And if you're lucky enough to be using Sitecore 9, then it has innate connectivity through X-Connect to virtually everything, and I mean that, but it also has pre-built CRM connectors to Salesforce and Dynamics, because this is customer data, this is single view, it does not belong in a web content management system or a digital marketing platform, no matter how fancy. It's corporate data and it belongs in a CRM, but it needs to be bi-directionally used as appropriate and where required. So the last part of this is really time to value as a structured workshop. It's all about business first. It's not about move this a pixel to the left. It's about what can we measure, what can we really optimize, and what can we drive business outcomes with. So my name is Greg Baxter. My email address is right there. If you would like to open dialogue, I would love to open dialogue with you. And one of the things we do is if you're needing to build executive buy-in, we take your website and build a prototype thing called the art of the experience that shows people what data is captured, what personalization looks like, and the incredible richness that you can discover about all of your customers and how we can exploit that. So right now, it'd be great to take any questions. I realize time is precious. I hope I did not go too fast, but I also hope you got a really good understanding that, you know, if you're a Sitecore owner, there is a real path, a yellow brick road, if you like, through to turning this stuff on and really using Sitecore as intended. So I'll be happy to take questions. Oops. I didn't mean to, of course, to turn the last slide off. Paresh, did we have anything come in?
Not yet. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat functionality, and we'll be happy to take those.
Or if you have deeper questions, feel very free to email me. I'd love, of course, to talk to you. Okay, Cheryl, you'd say you'd love to see where this is in Sitecore. When you log into Sitecore, whether it's version 8 up or earlier versions, you go to the marketing control panel, and this is where you set up a lot of this stuff. I'd absolutely be very happy to take you through a real live demo using Sitecore that shows you what the customer experience looks like, shows you what data we capture, and then how that was executed. So happy to take that offline. Happy to show you the marketing automation demo. That's a part of all of this. But all of this stuff is sitting inside Sitecore's admin interface, and maybe your IT team have permissioned some view of the tools out. That's really common. So what tools you see are dependent on permission levels that are set up when you view Sitecore. So I, of course, have my own demo systems with full admin capability, and I'd be super duper. Okay, so you're in admin, you see it all. If you go into the marketing control panel, you should see goals on there. You see it all too much. Okay, start with building out those goals. Absolutely goals foremost. Then, you know, some light rules-based personalization. So it does need to be planned. The workshop I'm talking about, time to value, is a one-day exercise. It's really, really fast, and we're very careful to manage the scope of this to an achievable 30-day outcome. So I, used to laugh a little bit when I was with Sitecore, because when they released the digital marketing suite, DMS, we all looked at each other and thought, oh my goodness, it's really the dream management system. So you can do an enormous amount in-house. Monica, I can see your question there, and I'd be happy to talk to you both about it. And maybe we could share a screen, we could log on, and I can show you, right there and then how you would build a profile and how you execute on it. That's not an issue at all, and how to build a goal. So Cheryl, Monica, please feel free to shoot me an email. We would have to schedule something for next week based on my workload tomorrow. I'm actually doing a major reveal for a company where I'm unveiling the outcome of a time to value report. And of course, I want to tick that off with their wider team, and then we'll go into production and make that happen. So anytime next week would be a blast. I'd love to do it. Sounds good to me. Any other questions? Paresh, it sounds not. Thank you too, Monica, and thank you, Cheryl, for asking and being part of the show. Really appreciate it. Look forward to talking.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Greg, for your time.
You're welcome. Goodbye, everybody. Have a fantastic evening.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.